This evening, at around 12 o'clock or 1 a.m., I was working DoorDash. I was accustomed to being up late, so making these late-night deliveries was somewhat regular for me. However, this night was slow. I drove around and listened to music as I waited for any orders to arrive. When one did, I drove up to the 24/7 McDonald's and picked up their order before accepting it without even looking at the details, because I didn't have many other options. The app guided me to the drop-off site, which was 15 minutes away. The entire drive was silent. The roads were still, and I was merely passing through the motions when I was only a minute away from being there. I'm not sure what to call it, but I suppose it was a commercial area, but it didn't appear like a typical one. Usually these places with many commercial buildings were well-kept and well-landscaped, but one location wasn't. The majority of the buildings appeared to be outdated and abandoned, and the surrounding bushes and grass were... The GPS turned me into a parking lot where a little office building existed, which was odd because it was overgrown and untrimmed. It appeared to be a single story, but it was just as dilapidated as the other locations where I had previously made deliveries to office buildings or employees. This wasn't particularly unusual. Rather, it was the peculiarity of the place that caused me to veer off the map and enter what appeared to be the rear of the building. It was a little unclear, so I checked the directions to see if there could be further information. However, a customer's note appeared, stating that they saw me come in and asked me to bring it up to the gray. My side of the building has a metal door. I answered okay, pulled up next to the building, and stepped out with the bag. As I approached it, I could tell this was unquestionably the rear of the building. There were several haphazard doors in the office, such as a fire exit door and other back access doors. But there was no main door. Even though it was a drab metal door, I located the one they were referring to, with no windows, markings, or anything else. As I got closer, my phone received another message, telling me to bring it inside for him. I kind of shrugged it off and followed his instructions without giving it any thought. It's too difficult. When I opened the door and entered, I saw that there was a corridor with only what appeared to be low-energy lights, small dim lights instead of the main lights. Light bulbs strewn down the corridor. To be honest, I was hoping for a room, a counter, or something that would make it clear where I could put the food. Was he going to meet me here? Or was he just going to stroll deeper into the building? I heard a click behind me as I took my phone out again to text him. I pivoted and observed the door. I pulled on the handle, but it was stuck. Someone had locked me in, causing my face to bleed profusely. I dropped the bag and tried again. I tried to open the door, but it didn't move at all. My only choice was to continue down the corridor, in the hopes of finding another exit before whatever was out there found me at the same moment. I heard a door open and close from someplace on the other side of the building as I started walking down the corridor. I quickly ran to the end and discovered another door when I opened it. I entered another dimly lighted hallway with several rooms on either side. But as soon as I heard something coming from the other end, I quickly decided to sneak into. A few seconds after hiding in one of the office rooms, footsteps rushed through the corridor and reached the entrance of the hallway I had just left. They then ran down toward. The door was locked. I fled in the direction the person had come from, hoping to find the exit. Fortunately, I did, and I hurried back to my car and drove away. Unfortunately, because they didn't send an officer there for 20 minutes, I don't think the officer on the phone completely comprehended the issue. Minutes. No one was present. but I was told that the office building had not been operational for the previous 5 or so years, so it was only partially deserted. Without cameras or anything, I'm not sure what would have occurred if I hadn't moved quickly enough to exit that hallway. I will not allow myself to get into a situation again. However, the same circumstance could occur again. Sponsor, Aura, recently experienced a massive data breach in which social security numbers and personal information belonging to 2.7 billion individuals were stolen. Make it possible for someone to access your bank accounts or even steal your identity. Therefore, it's more crucial than ever to take additional precautions to guarantee your security. Now is the ideal opportunity to utilize Aura's security service. I've been frequently sponsored by Aura for more than a year, and I genuinely think their service is outstanding. AA continuously monitors your personal information, addresses any problems that may arise, and keeps future threats at bay. Exceedingly simple to use and comprehend all that is happening with your data. With their free trial, you may have AA scan and delete your personal information from any location on the internet, including scammers, dark web data brokers, and hackers. After this, Aura will set up ongoing monitoring on all of your data so that any problems can be quickly fixed by alerting you as soon as they arise. When I originally signed up, Aura detected dozens of websites that already had my personal information. In only a few minutes, Aura removed everything, even my entire name and address. This is extremely important in these days of massive data breaches and frequent frauds. So having peace of mind, knowing that Aura is safeguarding your information, is more important than anything. You can obtain a fully free 14-day trial by whispering or scanning the QR code, which enables you to safely monitor your personal information and determine whether it has been compromised. Identity. Thank you once more to Aura for supporting this part of today's event. I strongly advise taking advantage of this chance to locate any leaking information and make sure it is handled and secured. I used to work for Domino's for a few months, but I didn't think it was too horrible overall. I ran pizzas back and forth from the store and earned extra money from tips. This evening, I arrived at 8:00. Our business was open until 12, and we received a remarkable number of orders that late, as if we were consistent. This order came in towards the end of the night, I would say around 11 or so. While I was just going through the orders one after the other, so I picked this one up and headed down the road. Since the most of the orders came from the same general, I wasn't as familiar with this direction. Here, one led me to the more dispersed, forested area of town. I had always assumed that here was where the wealthy had their remote mansions tucked away in the trees, but at night, it didn't seem that way. I drove until the directions instructed me to turn down a gravel road, which was broad and had lamps on the sides that guided me the entire distance before splitting at the end. I turned back to the location and saw a sign that said something like, "Welcome to the Frosted Oak Cabins," which was a cabin rental facility. There were 5 smaller lanes that were too narrow for a car to fit down. That was on the order, and it stated Cabin 3 at the end. I glanced at the signs beside each path and discovered one that led to Cabin 3. These paths had smaller, dimmer lamps along them, so I parked the car, grabbed up the pizzas, and started walking because I couldn't see down very far and didn't know how long I would have to travel. The dim lamps felt even worse as I moved closer, since I could hardly see anything until I was directly next to one. I was concerned because I would walk blindly to the next one for a minute after being in the light for a short while. I dropped the food or tripped over something. The woods were quite serene, with only the sound of crickets and leaves rustling in the breeze. I believe I walked for 3 or 4 minutes, but it felt like, before I reached the final lighting and the end of the walk, there was a small aperture in the middle of a tiny cabin with a window on the front. But strangely, there was no light coming from. When I approached the dark cabin and banged on the door, I could hear the knock echo within, but there was absolutely no sound. I took out my phone and dialed the number on the order. It rang for a full minute before no one picked up. I wasn't sure what to do, and I didn't want to walk all the way back for nothing. As I stood there, contemplating my options, I noticed the woods. Suddenly, I received a text from the same number I had just called. The text said, "I'm not at the cabin right now, so please leave the pizzas on the table inside. Thank you." I turned to face the door once more, twisted the handle and pushed the door. The door was slightly open, as instructed, but it still seemed a little strange because all the lights were off and it was really... I pulled the door open and walked a few steps inside. It appeared to be simply one long open room with perhaps a little bedroom at the end. After saying dark hello, "Is anyone home?" and getting no response, I proceeded over to the table and began putting the food down when I heard a creak. Before I could even think, my eyes darted to the bedroom door, and it opened so quickly that I nearly lost my heart. First, I assumed no one was home, but a man emerged at the doorway and approached me while I stammered awkwardly. The man attempted to tell me he had my tip and was expressing gratitude, me for bringing it inside, but he was approaching me quickly and violently, so I retreated. When he was only a few feet away, he leaped forward, attempting to grab me, and his expression changed to one of rage. I heard both of them chasing after me as I ran back to the walk after slamming into someone else as soon as I ran out the front door. He collapsed into the grass, and I managed to catch myself. I looked back and saw that none of the lighting were illuminating them. I quickly reached my car and drove away before they could catch up to me. I then contacted the Naturally. The police had both guys gone, but I had hoped that they could easily identify them using the order number and cabin rental, but they were unable to do so, and they broke into the unrented cabin, used a fictitious phone number, and made an online payment using a Visa gift card. So there was no way to identify them. Looking back, the incident seems nearly more horrifying. It was clearly their aim to bring me outside and into the cabin, so they could confine me inside. But the other guy appeared out of nowhere and spent the entire time observing me in the woods. Time waiting for me to enter. If he had been even a second quicker, they would have succeeded, and I'm not sure what they would have. It's been a long time since I worked deliveries as a type of side gig in my 20s, but I've never forgotten this one incident that occurred at that time. This evening, an order was placed at our restaurant at 9 o'clock, and when I went to deliver it at 9:20, I had no reason to think it wasn't a routine delivery. Nevertheless, the only minor variation was that, although it was 20 minutes distant, it was also 20 minutes away from the majority of our residential neighborhoods. The address appeared to be just like any other residential address, but as our shop was close to the outside of town, this was simply entering what I perceived to be a quite desolate area outside of town. Followed the instructions to enter the highway. Unlike the usual massive 4-lane highways, this 1-lane road stretched from our town through the forest to the next town. Even though I was aware that there were some older homes and subdivisions off this road, I assumed it would be one of them. After 15 minutes of driving on that road, which was quite deserted at that time of night, I was surprised to see that the directions didn't tell me to turn anywhere. Instead, they just stopped at what appeared to be a random spot on the road and stated, "My destination is on the right." At the very least, I pulled off to the side to observe what was going on. I tried using Google Maps and Apple Maps to look up the location, and both showed me exactly where I was on the road. I wondered if there was something I was missing. I pulled down the window and peered out to the side of the road, but all I could see were trees. It appeared to be a forest, with no lights or dirt driveways. Anything, in all honesty. I thought this was some sort of scam, so I just called the customer and asked where the hell his house was, or if there was a house at all. A joke. As I kept staring out at the forest, the phone rang, and I put it to my ear. A little later, a light appeared in the trees. Wasn't bright, but it was still visible in the dark woods. After a little while, though, it went out, and before I could give it much thought, a voice called, inquiring as to who called. "Hey, I received this order here, but I believe we have the wrong location." He asked me where I was, and after I gave him a description of the region, he said that it seemed to indicate that I was in the proper place. He mentioned a little driveway that led into the woods. I told him I didn't see it, but he said it was difficult to find and that I might need to walk outside to look for it. I groaned, replied, "All right," got out, and moved to the opposite side of my car. I asked him which way to look, but he abruptly hung up on me. I thought that was strange, but even stranger was the fact that, when I looked up and saw that brilliant light in the forest once more, it abruptly stopped. How in the world could that be the man I was just speaking to on the phone? Why wasn't he approaching the road? And if he was, why didn't I notice a driveway heading in that direction? I looked back down, and I suppose I noticed what he was referring to, a very narrow, rough dirt line that led into the woods. I say line because that's about all there was to it. It wasn't a driveway, even if it appeared to be. There was no way in hell that I was going to walk down there and into the forest, especially with what was happening with the person out there. It was scruffily carved with a little shovel or something. As I placed the food by the side of the road, I heard leaves rustling in the forest shrubs. I quickly went to get my car, bailed out of there. Fortunately, I wasn't foolish enough to follow the man on the phone and into the woods, because there was a problem. I could sense it, but I had nothing to truly demonstrate. What might have occurred that evening, I'll never understand.